All right. Yeah, cool. We're back.
Good morning, Karl.
Good morning, Skip.
We have more snow here. And how about
Oh,
you?
a little bit. I mean, since last week, that Friday when we spoke, we got about a foot since then.
Okay. Well, I don't feel so bad then because I can still walk with just my garden shoes on. So it's only about 4 or 6 inches here.
Yeah, it's time to go sledding, Skip. Come on
Mm,
out and let's get on the tubes.
the only sled I have is my old windsurf boards in the garage. I
Ah,
don't think that'll work.
um, yeah, I hear you. I'm just going to monitor the feed in case we get any questions here. And
Oh, okay.
so, good morning to the world. Hello, world. Skip and I are back for another drum talk or music talk, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. J'ai chaque image.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, where do we start? Last night, no, this morning you sent me the thing of, is it 81? Is that the name of that tune?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And on the Jeff Richmond, if you happen to see this, I should tag you on this. In fact, I'm going to just, because he's usually up pretty early, I'm going to put Jeff's name in here in the comments. Let's see if we can get Jeff to join us in at least the comment category. Yes, so we're talking about, before we went live, this tribute to Miles album that Jeff Richmond, that was his brainchild and idea, and he's put out quite a few tribute albums. But this one
Yeah.
track, man, that was a beautiful. I listened to it 3 times. I got on, yeah.
Yeah.
Phil
The
Connors and Vinny, and who else is on that?
it's there's more that Alphonso Johnson. Slim is on there.
Slim. Yeah, Jeff and Alfonso live very close to each other, Granada
Oh, wow.
Hills, and they're good friends still. Yeah, that's cool. And
Well, I got to that because I saw another one that had a tribute to like Weather Report, and so they covered the tunes that I'm on were on there too, and I wanted to hear what those sounded like, and then that led me to the one about Miles. And what I do with that stuff is when I find tunes that are, to me, kind of like representative of what iconic tunes, something like that, then I drill down on those. So I'll make a whole file of the song 81 with all the renditions I can find.
oh, cool.
And so then when I work with my students on it, will work with that tune and where the kicks are on that. So that first one is like, where's that kick after all that timekeeping, what measure,
Right.
what beat is that kind of thing. And then I'll get them to try and find that in all the different renditions that we can find, plus the lead sheet. So they can actually play the melody, they can keep their place and hear all these different versions of how this tune is done. So Tony Williams is like on the original of it. It's off of the ESP, Miles Davis recording, but there are quite a few renditions of that tune. And I do that with all the tunes I can find that fit in with where the students are coming from and what we're working on.
See, that's cool. Yeah, so part of that tune, I think, is in 7. Then it goes into just a straight up 4. I love the way Vinny just, is quintessential Vinny on his placement of everything. where the pocket is, where the setups, the everything. It's just the going over the, well, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that video that he did, the promo video did when he was doing the development for the A cymbals.
Yeah.
He was part of that development, and he did a video for Zildjian that you could get at the counter when you went to look for cymbals. And there's some burning stuff on that free well, it was VHS tape. Maybe somebody's digitized it and put it up, but it's it's burning. And it's just him playing along with tracks.
Wow. Let's see if I can find that.
Yeah,
so much has been digitized these days, so that's a good thing just to
Yeah,
have
well,
it
like
available.
that list of like 81s and stuff like that, whatever's coming on, like in the survey class, it'll be that I do the history of jazz from 1880 to 1960s is every week send out a URL list.
Okay.
And it's all the stuff that I would present in the class live, which I can't do anymore because we're online. And that includes the videos. So there's
Okay.
a list that I send them with all the links. And then because they're in that class, they have the access on Berkeley's website to all the bio and transcriptions and all that stuff. So it's kind of like a split screen like me. They have the URLs and the links. And on Zoom, they also have, well, there's three. They got me, and then you got two sheets, URLs and the OL site, so that they can read along and they can watch and listen, so it's kind of a full plate for them because they're trying to watch and listen or check out the transcriptions all at the same time. But by giving them that way, then they have access to it beyond the class. They can always go, like a lot of guys get back to me after years and go, well, I remember that class I was in, and it'd be, 30 years ago or something. I still got that list on it, So it works into antiquity.
It's a great way to do it with the list, and the tune and all the renditions.
Well, it takes a lot of time on their part if they're into it. So
sure.
I give them way more stuff than we could do in 2 hours. But if you're into it, it's there. It's not, okay, I understand.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I wonder, is it Steve Tavaglione maybe on soprano? I'm just guessing. Kind of sounds like Steve.
Yeah.
Oh, it is? Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, so and then I hear like a B3 or a Wurlitzer or something in there. Beautiful sound.
Maybe that's Scott or somebody like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool. I have a bunch of Jeff's CDs, Jeff Richman, great guitar player, writer, composer. He's put out a lot of stuff over the years, and he, works with my favorites, so many of my idols, not just drums, but everything. And all the CDs are really nice. I was checking out a bunch of your stuff, and well, first I went over to Rap Man on YouTube, and I checked out Rap Man with on the I forget the gentleman's name, but Dewey Redman's on that tune.
Right.
Michael somebody?
Michael Bocian and Cameron Brown.
Man, that is just there's a question I was trying to think of how to ask it. And you actually articulate this in a video that I saw about let's say when you're supporting a group, you're playing.
Oh, you mean the time frame and the canvas?
And then it comes to your time to do trade. Let's say you're trading, and instead of distinct cutoff points, it's just taking maybe a view from further away and looking at everything as one. And your words and how you described it were way better than I just did. But that whole thing of this flow is the word that comes to mind.
Well, it's great you should mention that because a really great bass player in Australia, a friend of mine, Lloyd Swan, we played with Dewey together when we were in Australia. Dewey and I went to New Zealand and to Australia, and we picked up people to play with there. And Lloyd worked with us on almost all the dates. And he had a tape of us playing in Perth.
Okay.
It was a strange, we were there like a month, and we stayed in Sydney, and our day trips would be like Brisbane, Perth. They're like flying to LA, and we would get up and fly there and play. Of course, with doing sound check, you just went up on the stage and you played. Mm-hmm. And he had tapes of one of those things. And then he was really nice, and he talked about that what I did was able to produce this thing that was real exciting, but had this real open feel to it, was relaxed at the same time. And, that was great to hear. It's something that I tried to do for a long, long time. And it was to create a lot of space. And one of the ways that space can be created is like going to different levels at the time. And that had to do with that sheet that I sent you that Peter had in a little article. There's like literally four lines.
Yeah, 4 different levels or something like that.
Of the time. Yeah. And I think we did a little bit of that, and I sang like some melody and demonstrated it in one of the other get-togethers.
Yeah,
but
you did.
That tune that you're listening to, that Ratman, does that. And one of the illusions that it creates too, a lot of spaces, there's no hi-hat. There's no 2 and 4. So right away, it just starts going. It just starts like opening up. It's like time-lapse photography for watching a flower grow. It just goes, oh, okay. Yeah. And then I play the phrase that sets it up, which is the melody, which is part of the melody. Everything I'm doing is in reference to the melody, although maybe it doesn't sound like it. It's like all on me in my head. And then it's into time and going out. And so that kind of thing works. And that was one of the things that made it so I could do things with Dewey, because he liked that. It was time, but untime.
Yeah. There's, and I mean this, hopefully you'll accept this as a compliment. There's a tune that Dewey plays on Pat Metheny, 8081 with Jack DeJohnette. Dewey plays on a few tunes. And it's a similar type of thing, actually. There's this space and this openness, yet the flow is there. Jack is kind of a flow master. And the groove is there, even if there's no actual groove, as groove is usually defined. So it's a groovy flow.
It's not metronomic in that sense.
Right. And I enjoy that. And that recording you were talking about here, Ratman. The other thing that's really cool is whoever produced it did a nice job, but the cymbals and the tone of the drums, not just the attack and how the heads sound when you first have this stick hitting, but
we worked on it for a little bit. It was Michael McDonald was the engineer, and we did it on 28th Street at that. And we got, I forget the name of the studio. It might be the right track, I don't know, but it was where Joey Lovano did all of his recordings, and Michael and Joey and we were all like from Cleveland, so we know one another. And Michael actually was on one of Joey's CDs earlier on. So he told him to go to this place, and that's where we did that one. And he was really helpful about getting a drum sound and doing what I wanted. One of the tunes, I used 2 hi-hats.
Really cool.
Because I could play double bass drums on it, double pedals on it, and Michael was no double bass, So then I said, well, what about 2 hi-hats? And he didn't care about that. So one of the tunes has, on that Reverence CD, has 2 hi-hats instead of using a hi-hat and a bass drum. So you have chick chop, chick chop, chick, 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 chop, chick, and it's another like bass drum. It's not on 2 and 4.
I gotta check that out. I'll check that out. That's very cool. And then no hi-hat on Ratman, which is so cool.
In that solo and in Dewey's solo, but in Michael's solo, yes. So it comes in and out. Yeah. And that's those, I think that recording had maybe even these, I don't know what, no, it was an old set of Z-A combinations.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
the hi-hats were Z-A combinations.
I remember back late 80s, I'd been listening so much to, well, I think I might have said this before. And lately, actually just yesterday from my doctor, I found out that inflammation in the brain and brainstem is real post-COVID. So forgetfulness is real. So that's why I might be repeating myself. Not because I usually do that, but because I don't remember everything, but it'll come back. Anyways.
Yeah, but the other thing too is
I
that
feel
you
good.
do this so often with so many different people, it'd be like, it's more than encyclopedic, the amount of information you're flowing through.
Well, yeah, sometimes that, you know, what's funny is I didn't plan to be doing very many of these. And I'm not even sure how it came about. What's interesting too is that this is just a statement of fact, not, you know, it ain't about me. It's just about sharing with people, with people who would like to share with people who are interested in what they have to say, like you. I've had a couple of my idols send me messages, said, can you have me as a guest? Because I want to be documented with all these great musicians. Really? You're asking me? Of course we can. So it ended up being more than I'm actually planning to space them out more, because it's been a barrage lately, and I'm grateful. I love it. I absolutely love it. But I also don't want to take away from anybody. Like, if even one a day, that's too much. Maybe one every 3 days, 4 days, so that it has time to be seen, heard, to watched, whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, that's beside the point. Yeah, the information's been a lot, but I'm pretty good with remembering things. So I don't think I told you. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Yeah. So anyways, I went backwards. I went from 12 years old, being introduced to Return to Forever, Mahavishnu, Headhunters. And then I went totally forwards with anything anybody did in that arena. And then when I was about 17, I discovered Miles, and I started listening. And then I started going backwards in time, you know, and eventually getting back to some of the, well, even, you know, the 40s and maybe a little 30s, but Bird, the early Train, a lot of different people, Dexter. So in the late 80s, though, I felt like I had enough listening that I could come up with some ideas myself. And in my head is where I did most of my practicing anyways, because I never really enjoyed practicing. I think I probably would now, though. And I had this idea of flow. I remember talking with my mom about it. I said, "You're in for something new, Mom." And you know, actually, some of the stuff I did, I just, you know, I never wrote a song, but working with other people, when the opportunity came about, I could work into this idea of space and flow. It was really cool. But now, as I, you know, 30 years later or more, flow means something different to me now. And I love what you do. You know, the broken eighth note thing is cool. And the way, how many, it's amazing to me how many ways you can do something with only like two hands or three limbs and make it sound
two
totally
feet and
different.
two hands.
Yeah.
That's all based on 2 feet, 2 hands, the same stuff that's in the Beat the Body, the Brain.
Exactly.
It's that same thing, but moved not from a broader style like fusion, which that book is, to a specific jazz style that's literally based on, the content is based on 5 pages from an Alan Dawson book.
Really? So this diagram here, that's said it all to me. It's like, okay, now I could actually visualize this. And that right there is a lesson in itself, a long lesson or a lot of lessons.
And I found with that graphic is when I do it live, is I draw it on the board, on a whiteboard. I put that box with all the arrows in it, and then I put 2 hands and 2 feet at the corners of that box.
Okay.
Of course, I picked somebody's hairstyle out and I draw the head and their hair on that, which personalizes it a little bit. Yeah. But the idea that the hands and the feet are connected to that box, added in. Otherwise, it looks rather impersonal and not connected to, gee, what's that? But if I do that graphic, it ends up, I'm laughing because it usually gets somebody to laugh because I do
Sure.
something in their face with their hair, but it makes it a lot more accessible to do it that way. But it's true.
Sure.
It's any combination that you could come up with between your hands and feet. And it's like what a piano player does with his 10 fingers, but we have to, as drummers, have to move a whole arm or leg to express that.
Mm-hmm. True.
And so it's like, okay, we got less than 10 fingers, but we have way more sounds than 88 keys.
Right.
Depending on what kind of setup we have or where we play, spatially on those heads all produces a different sound. So it's actually way more than 88, but.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The heads, the cymbals,
Mm-hmm.
how cymbals can sound in different parts of the cymbal or different parts of the stick.
Right. And then your attack, like on the cymbal, that difference that I use, you'll notice on, not so much on that recording, but on some other later ones that I've done, that there'll be more of that knock knock kind of Bill Stewart kind of sound because of how you attack the cymbal with your hand and how you're touching it. So it's a matter of developing touch, not unlike you would do with brushes laterally on a head, but now we're doing that same thing on the cymbal with the stick. And then what stick you use has a great degree of influence over how that sound is. If it's a big bead and it's broad, it's going to have a really big, broad sound. But if you play focused round tips, or even like the little Peter Erskine Fusion kind of sticks with the round ball on it, it's going to be much more concentrated stick sound. And then you can achieve that knock knock kind of sound. I can't do it on these cymbals now because it will just distort the way it's set up. The new Zoom thing that I did messed with all my settings for using the EAD. So I'm trying to solve that kind of thing. So that's why when I'm seeing Peter Erskine or yesterday with Tom Breckline and going through about, I got this set up and then they have this great sound and I'm going, because,
Yeah. Peter, well, both of them put a lot into the setups there in their studios. And of course, I know Peter's teaching, and I think he might have mentioned that at USC, one or two of the practice rooms, maybe one of them has also a similar setup with 4 cameras.
Yeah.
With high bandwidth internet and all that stuff. So I guess it's called adapting, right? And knowing that stuff. Well, I don't know much about the technology stuff. I just have a real basic setup here for what we're doing right now. Music-wise, I haven't experimented yet. Sergio's going to be with me next Tuesday, and he's going to actually use his 4-camera setup for a little playing, too, and demonstrations.
Yeah, he's been working hard and setting that stuff up. And it's quite extensive. It's not rack-mounted cameras that move or power cameras that zoom, but yeah, he's got it together. It makes mine look like I'm out in the barn somewhere.
Well, we all have our setups, and
or lack of them,
or we don't have one. I don't have one. I have no setup.
Yeah, well, it makes it difficult because I do online lessons with guys like China and Italy and stuff like that, and then it's if I can't produce it here, and they end up having to make videos with my iPhone or iPad and then sharing them with them to get the point across, and then vice versa, them back to me. But
sure, yeah, sometimes it just has to be like that because of whatever computer speed, bandwidth, techie stuff. Dude, this is a total side note just for a minute, but Sergio was telling me yesterday he's going to be taking a piano lesson with Kenny Werner next week. It's like, I love Kenny, man. I've only seen him once, Regatta Bar, Garzone, Scott Kelly, and Antonio Sanchez, and it was a magical 2 sets.
Yeah.
What a beautiful, beautiful quartet that is. I just love it. So is Kenny Boston based?
No. He lives in the let's see, I forget the name of the town, but it's north of New York.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
maybe not the Catskills, but somewhere near there.
Newburgh,
And
Yonkers, Newburgh.
you above Yonkers, I think, but on the west side of the river.
Okay.
In that area. And he's been there for quite a while. He was in New Jersey for a while, Scotts Plains, but and then he moved a little bit further north.
Okay.
And he's part of that religious community that's near there too. Their center is near there.
Okay.
But yeah, I forgot what I was talking about. Ask me something.
Oh yeah. Well, we can dial it back. We were going talking a little bit about camera setups and studio setups, and then just overall just information coming through that me trying to remember things I shared with you. There was more than that too.
I remember what you asked if Kenny was a Boston or Berkeley based, and no, he comes up or now does stuff online, but he was coming up like for 3 days every couple of weeks. It was he has his whole effortless mastery thing that he does with work, and that started about 6 years ago or so.
Oh, okay.
And we had talked about that he wanted to do something like that, so I said, man, you should talk to Roger, get that happening. And it came to be reality. So he has an assistant and she sets everything up, and he does these online things. He did them through an office there at school where he would meet with people on one or in groups.
Okay.
And a lot of guys have benefited, a lot of guys, a lot of gals have benefited from that effortless mastery and that same kind of thing. And he did some classes with me when we were doing the artistry, creativity, and integrity classes.
Mm-hmm.
He came and played, and then we played together for them. And there would be 50 sections of 20 students.
50?
Yeah, 50. Yeah, there were 1,000 students.
1,000 students. Whoa, man.
That took those classes. But I mean, I was just one of many that did it. But Kenny was nice enough to come and be part of that class. And Sergio actually did it, I think in 2015, he came and talked about entrepreneurship and stuff. It was one of those things about getting people, it was for freshmen. So it was to get them ready to be at school and what was possible.
Okay.
And it ended up me doing that spin-off kind of thing of mental concepts of control about those two questions. Why are you playing and what are you trying to communicate with the music you play? But it was a little overwhelming for them their first semester at school, I think. A few people picked up on it, but it was something that you had to like opt into, that you had to choose to be a part of. And that went on for a few years. And it was, with some people, really popular. They took it more than once, 2-3 times for some people. It was like, yeah. Because the answers to the questions changed every time you asked them.
Interesting. You know, I can see where it could be hard to, it could be overwhelming, because when I was 20 and 19, or maybe even 50, because I'm a late bloomer and a slow grower, but man, I remember going through a phase where for weeks I would just practice stuff like, or play along with the 4 and More album, Burnin', Up Speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I heard something about, well, Steve Gadd practiced with brushes on cardboard. So
well, that was just part of that video, yeah. But yeah.
And so I decided that I would find any surface that would allow for a good brush rotation and not jam up the wires, and then start doing some of that. And I went through a phase for really months of all different tempos, but just finding a pattern that I liked, and then trying to, have the control to articulate different things. And there was absolutely, the reason I'm saying this is because there was absolutely no intention behind anything I did other than just getting techniques down. So it wasn't like I was going to make a musical statement, because I couldn't even comprehend what that was. However, I had a really good lesson maybe 15 years ago from David Castiglione, a sax player who I love, lives near me, although I haven't seen him in like 4 years. But anyways, we were doing a tenor sax and drum duo just at his house, just
Mhm.
playing for about an hour. He says, "Man, you got some cool chops and all that." Says, "Now, what do you want to say?
Mhm. Exactly. Yeah.
What is your intention?" And we talked about that for probably a good hour out on the front porch. And you know what? When we went back, we were playing for maybe 5 minutes, and then he just pulls a horn out and he says, "That's what I'm talking about."
Yeah.
I'm not even sure that I knew exactly what it was I was doing, but I was doing something, and it was the road, it was the pathway. It's one of the best lessons that I've ever had. And a lot of lessons I've had that were really great were from not a sit down play, show you stuff, and not from drummers, although I've had some great from drummers too, but more of a concept.
Yeah.
So much value in that.
Well, that beat the body, the brain thing is part of that. There isn't anything that's going to be happening, licks, technique, or anything, unless it's coming from between your ears. And so the idea is to get something that you can do and then listen to what's going on and then try to support it with what you hear internally and what you hear externally.
Yeah, right.
And that's that drum wisdom stuff, like the Bob Moses, we have interior and exterior listening. But the idea is that why are you doing anything?
Right.
What is this supposed to be? It could be even like, why are we doing this talking on the internet kind of thing?
True.
And the first part of it is that we actually get along, even though we're hundreds of miles apart, and we can talk about stuff. And it
Yeah.
was just because Sergio said, well, you ought to talk to Skip. And then
Exactly. Yeah.
and each one of these opens up like that. And
I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk with you. I never want to ask for too much of your time, but if I ever do, please tell me. But I look forward to this a lot because I come out of this not only with different ideas about music, but a lot of the stuff transfers into life.
yeah, because that's what music is.
It's
it's
they're the
it's like, wow, what a concept.
right, and it's not a separate entity,
No.
and it's everything parallels.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it was like, I remember like my grandmother whistling or my mother singing when they were doing dishes or doing laundry or something like that. And that was, it was part, or listening or putting on a LP or something was part of what was going on in their lives. And
Right.
so it would be like, well, the drums could be a part of that too. And then it got separated into like, you want to play drums for like a job, then, and it
Yeah.
was like, yeah, okay. So that at 15, I left home because I wanted to play drums and I was supposed to be a doctor, so it was like, because I had the grades for that and everything, but the
Hmm.
drums kind of like took over. So it wasn't till like, wow, um, years later,
Hmm.
I was playing, I think I mentioned that gig where I had, it was like 6 to 8 and 9 to 2
Yeah.
at night for like 6 nights a week. And it was
Hmm.
paying me to practice. The music was good. And I had an organ player in that group was really good, Jerry Sergo. He's
Hmm.
still playing at a church, but um, really a great guy to hang out with. And I look up one night when I'm playing and there's my dad standing off stage. And then I went and I talked to him because it had been a while since I had talked to him. And he said, you had the right idea.
Wow.
It took like years to
Mhm.
hear that, but it was like, yeah,
That's
I knew
great.
that, but it took him that long to like, and it was nice of him to like get it together, come and show that kind of support. But
Yeah.
I got
Yeah.
along all those years without it until that jumped it up.
Sure. Yeah, that kind of support means a lot. It can propel you forward, and it's good. I was wondering actually, who were your very very first influences of any kind? Let's say drum wise or music you listened to.
It wasn't even, the drums for me were just seeing the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother took me to, she was part of the Masons ladies thing, it's called Eastern Star.
Oh yeah,
And
my
they
grandmother
had,
was too. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and they had some kind of festivity thing around the holidays. I think it was like 4 years old or something, and gave the kids that were there with the ladies that were part of that thing. And I got a chance to choose between this kid's drum set. And all I remember was like, you know, a spotlight on the cigarette in the ashtray kind of thing. There's nothing there but that
Yeah.
fire and like, what's that kind of thing? And the drum set was in that spotlight. And my grandmother made me take the doctor's bag, which reverts back to that other story.
Sure.
So the choice was between those two, and I was not happy about it. And it was the fact of seeing that, and I didn't know anything about what that really was.
Mm-hmm.
It was just boom.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I was 7, I was taking lessons, and I studied with Ralph Pace. I don't know if you know that guy's name.
I sure do. Yeah.
And my mother would drive me over, and I would do like 20-minute, 30-minute lesson. And Ralph was, I don't know if I can teach him. I never had a kid this young, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't do it summers. I just did it during the fall and spring. But my
Mm-hmm.
mother knew my lessons much better than me, and she would try to get me to practice. I still have the pad from well,
that's great.
mid 50s. It's like my son sat on it. My son sat on it, kind of bent it up, but I still have it. But
Mm-hmm.
And that went on, and I played in the marching band and all that kind of stuff. And I didn't ever learn to read very well or anything, probably because of that AD kind of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
that was it. And then I got into sports and didn't play for a while. And then we moved to Cleveland. This is all happening in New York because that's where Ralph's studio was, in North White Plains.
Okay.
And we used to drive over from Portchester, which is where I'm from.
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
and then we moved to Cleveland, and I didn't have any friends or anything. I was still doing well at school, all that kind of stuff. This is before I was 15, and got into doing that. And then I realized that I didn't have any friends really other than sports stuff. And somebody at school knew that I had played drums, but I didn't have a set or anything. And I just had a snare drum, a field drum, you know,
Okay.
marching band drum,
Mm-hmm.
wooden hoops and the whole thing. And they said, we heard you played drums. And I was like, wow, how do I get this together? And somehow or another, I ended up playing with those guys. And that was that band that ended up being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was the Local Legends from Cleveland, which is where rock and roll, they kind of placed it. That's where it started with Alan Freed and those concert things that he did. But yeah, it was, and we used to open for guys that had recordings. We had recordings, but we were selling them from the stage kind of thing even then. And we had a manager and a trailer. I mean, it was like really neat. I kind of fell into this situation. And we used to open for like Duke of Earl. You remember that tune? Oh, yeah. So that was around that time period. And then moved to other things. I was in The Outsiders for a minute. Time Won't Let Me.
Okay.
But just a hot minute. And then I went on to do other things. And I was doing, this is going on a long time, sorry, but.
No, it's fine. Totally fine.
So while I'm doing that band, the guitar player and I got asked by a gentleman in the town where we were, and this was in Berea, Ohio, where Baldwin Wallace College is. And he asked us to be a support musicians for his stepdaughter, who was appearing on this show called The Big Five. It was in Cleveland every Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
And so we said, sure. So it was a guitar and drums, and we backed up this little girl. She was like 8 or 10 years old on this show. And we ended up getting other work, like backing people up doing that kind of thing. But on that show, there was other guys like Roland Kirk was on that show with Steve Ellington one day.
Oh, geez.
And he used my drums, right?
Okay.
So he was really nice and really, great man. I had a set of Rogers that I bought and steel gray ripple pearl. And that's another whole story about how I got to that, because they were made in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was real nice to me. So I invited him to come to my house, that kind of thing. And he came and we had a chicken dinner or something. I mean, it was like,
that's
and
cool.
from that, I met other guys. And you were talking about get concept things or your mind being opened up by people. I took it as being other than drummers, that what you said. So I met Joe Alexander, was a great saxophone player, played with Woody Herman's band and a whole bunch of other things. He kind of like took me under his wing, and I would bring my drums over to his house and we'd go in the basement, we'd set up by the furnace and I would play my drums, those steel gray ripple drums, and he would play saxophone. And I remember they didn't even have a strap really for his saxophone. He used his tie and we would play. And then if it went longer, then he would ask me to stay for dinner. And his wife was like, why is this kid here? And his daughter was there, and I would stay. And then that went on for a while. And I tried to do that as long as I could. And then that worked out to be with other people of color too, that were really supportive to me to make that happen. Vaughn Freeman, I don't know if you know about him, from Chicago.
I do. I used to go see him when I lived there, and I had a conversation with Chico, his son,
right,
last June or May, just because I used to go see them together too. Yeah, I remember Vaughn.
Yeah, and we worked together for 2 weeks. It was backing a singer, McKee or something, and it was like on the road kind of thing. But he was great to me too, and he would take me to sit in whatever city we were in, and like I was just, I have no idea what he saw in what I was doing, but it was great that I got that support.
That's great. And
all the while that was going on, that guy that had hired us to back the young girl on TV became my mentor. He wasn't a player or anything like that, but he said, did you ever hear jazz? And I was like, no, I know. What's that? And this would have been early 60s. So I started hanging out with him, and he would play me records. He had Stan Kenton, Peter, before Peter Erskine. But
like Mel Lewis was on some of that stuff, and the Baron, John Van Nolan, a little after that, before Peter. Yeah.
And so this thing came, and then when I was 15 and left home right around this time, his name is Don Kent, and he changed it to Kent. But he took me in, and I lived in the upper part of his house, and we got to practice. And of course, I helped those guys out by watching his kids, his stepkids, stuff like that. But that ended up being something where it was like, yeah, this is worthwhile. And he said, you should be taking some lessons. So I said, I have no idea what to do. So he used to go and hang out a lot at different clubs and stuff. So he found this restaurant on a street called Short Vincent. It was this club, really nice club for that time period. They had a band, a trio, 6 nights a week kind of thing. And the drummer was Bob McKee.
Okay.
So Bob McKee, it turns out, was the drummer on the Mike Douglas show for all those years that they were in Cleveland. So this guy could play. Yeah. So I started studying with Bob at Don's behest, and going over to Bob's house and all that kind of thing. And then Bob hooked me up with some gigs. I ended up playing across the street from him. So they were in the opening trio for all these guys, including Papa Joe Jones, Gene Krupa. I got to see all those guys play. Wow. Yeah. And one night even hung out with Papa Joe in the dressing room. It was all this kind of stuff that was available just because somebody saw something that they liked. The whole thing kind of unwound,
Well, just this morning I was thinking, I remember talking with Dennis Chambers. We've been messaging a lot, trying to get him back. Probably do something next week. He actually has. I'm going off on a tangent, but I know where I'm coming back to. So
okay, we'll get to you.
Yeah. So what it is he has an old kit of Papa Joe's.
Wow.
And I was thinking about him. I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about Papa Joe. And actually, the thought came up. I wonder if Skip ever got to like see or hang with Papa Joe. So you did.
Hmm. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, what kind of a guy was he? What was it like to hang out with him?
He had these idiosyncratic ticks that he did. He had things that he did. Like, his body would, at this point, this would have been, I don't know, this is maybe mid 60s now. And he was very generous. I mean, I was only this one time, but he had these little red slippers that he had to wear in order to play. He had all these kinds of things that he said were really necessary to be able to play. But I don't remember anything about any drum stuff that he told me. I don't think that he did. We just talked about whatever was crossing his mind. And it was kind of neat. Again, it wasn't anything about drums. It was the fact that somebody would sit and spend time with you. Yeah. That was inspiring.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if I talk with Dave Weckl, we hardly ever talk about drums. We talk about muscle cars.
Right.
He's a car guy and I'm a car guy.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about technology. He taught me how to use my camera because I couldn't figure it out when we were doing a thing at his house a couple of years ago. He just moved to St. Louis, actually, I guess. Right. But anyways, those to me though, it's just interesting because drummers are humans too, and drummers play drums, right? But we have other interests, and I think some people think we would always talk about drums, and maybe we will, maybe we won't. It can go all over the place, but that's one of the things I like about these talking with people is, well, I can learn something from everybody. It doesn't matter who it is. I'm famous for going out. If I get to a city and I'm going to be working, teaching my course or whatever, Parkinson's stuff, if it's a nice night, I might just go out and just walk around and talk with people who are on the street. Maybe that's where they live. I've learned a lot of stuff from a lot of people who don't have a place to live. Wow. And they just appreciate the time. I actually, another tangent, I don't ever really carry cash on me. I just don't need to, but I probably should. But time is more valuable usually to a lot of people than money, unless maybe they have a habit they want to support and the money's more important. But most of the time it's just giving somebody attention for a while can mean a lot to them. But I also can learn, very, very fascinating. No matter, we can learn so much from so many people. So that's cool. Now going back to Papa Joe, that's really cool. You got to hang out with him. You also mentioned Gene Krupa. That was my dad's number one influence. In the 30s, 40s, especially. I never saw Gene, but my dad saw him many times. Gene was I hear that Gene was a pretty cool guy to hang with, just friendly and everything.
Well, I never got a chance to hang with him because he was good friends with Bob McKee, who was they worked opposite one another, and they became good friends. And there's symbols that were part of Bob's estate. He passed away, and the symbols were down in the practice room where you would take the lessons. They were stuff that Gene had given him.
Oh, I see. Cool.
Yeah, so they were kind of tight. I don't know how tight because I wasn't part of that circle or that duo of friends, but yeah.
Did you ever see Gene play? Did you get to watch him?
Yeah, I would see him when he was opposite Bob at that club. Oh, I would run down on my breaks between what I was doing. Yeah. And the maitre d', his name was Mort, knew who I was, and he knew I was a student of Bob's. He would let me in if I would stay out of the way and not, if it wasn't too crowded, kind of thing.
That's nice.
So I could, because you couldn't just walk in there and stand around, and I couldn't afford to sit at the bar.
Yeah.
It was a little out of my price range, kind of thing. Sure. So I would just go over on my break for 10, 15 minutes and listen to stuff, and then go back across the street and run up 3 flights of stairs to where I was playing at another club. Yeah, but it was a real opportunity. And Bob was on a break, then I would run over to a place called The Clock, which was on East 9th Street. And he was friends with the people that owned that club, and he had a practice pad in the back room. So I'd go over there and he'd be practicing on the breaks. It would be like, oh, this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And then Bob opened a drum shop on 16th and Euclid, I think it is, or 19th. And then I worked for him there at the counter and met people.
Okay.
Marvin Dahl Green, you know, he came by and gave me a book one day. It was like, all you got to do is be in the right place kind of thing. But you couldn't buy a ticket to this.
No, yeah, right. I know exactly what you mean. I mean, my closest experience to anything like that would be a lot of the festivals I've played at where I, meet Dizzy,
right,
because we're the band before him, or meet, Joel Rosenblatt, or, I mean, just so many different people over the years. And you can't buy a ticket to that either, like backstage or off stage in the back. The special experiences, a lot of them just a one-time situation, but things I'll never forget, because even 5 minutes or 2 minutes with somebody can be super interesting and memorable. And sometimes they're not so good experiences, but for the most part, they're always good.
Yeah, but they all end up being learning experiences.
They do, yeah. They really do.
And so that's the thing. I mean, I'm just talking about all the good things, but I mean, there were times that I would go and try to do something and it would fail miserably, and then it would be, okay, well, now I know what I got to do because that didn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So when you were introduced to jazz, as the timeline moves forward, like who were the first players, even non-drummers, like who were the first people you were listening to that really had a big impact on you?
Oh, that would have been the Ventures.
Okay.
Surfing music.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that was what it is. And then I listened to a lot of Dwayne Eddy, guitar player, West Coast. And it turns out it was Earl Palmer was the drummer on all of that.
No way. Okay.
And they didn't find that out for 50 other years, but yeah. But that kind of thing. And then the stuff with Don, he was playing with me a lot of big band stuff like that. And then I started like checking. I would go to the record store down on Prospect, I think it was in Cleveland. And there was a trumpet player, a guy that worked behind the counter that was really nice. And then when you were in the record shop, then you could take the records and you had a little booth and you could put the record on the turntable and listen to it.
Oh, wow.
And then you were supposed to buy them. But this guy would let me go and listen to the different recordings.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like teenager, before maybe 15, 16, something like that. So it was nice. If it was busy, you couldn't do that. But, and then I found out, and then it was like my experience with learning about wines. At first, it was all, I bought everything, birds and animals on them. And then I got into, more about what was in the bottle, and that wasn't always the way to do it. But the recovers to the albums, the LPs, were a great draw for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and still to this day, the AD stuff, maybe I remember stuff by what's on the cover and the color and the graphics.
I do too.
Yeah.
Years ago, so I don't know, it's in Toronto with Peter Erskine. We had breakfast one morning for hours, nearly floated away from all the coffee we drank. But we were talking about how it was just the coolest thing to get an album, vinyl, and especially if it opened and there was stuff, pictures and things to read, or even if it was a double album, and maybe when you pull out the sleeve, there might be pictures and stuff on the sleeve, but liner notes. The only disadvantage of with like a double album or a folding cover is if the liner notes on the inside, you can't read them before you buy it. But still, it was the coolest thing because you would buy it. I would read those things over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
I really, really, and just the whole, I missed that, but the look of the cover, very important to me. It was a draw, big draw for me too.
It's that beat the body, the brain thing again. It's seeing it, the kinetic experience of holding on to it so you can actually grasp. Yeah, well, okay, thank you. But the thing is that the idea for doing handouts for stuff, particularly live, is that kinesthetic experience for people who can actually grasp the ideas of what there are. And if you can support that with music, like the transcriptions in your hand, you can listen, you can hear. That Profiles in Jazz Drumming book is that. Lots of transcriptions that Fabio Pirazzolo did for me, because he's great at it. And then there's a CD in the book of all of the solos, real time, and then slowed down.
Oh, cool.
So you didn't get it? Okay, now you don't have to do that. You can just take the solo full speed, put it into any tune, and put it wherever you want to be able to listen to it. But at that time period, it didn't exist that way. But that was the idea behind it, was to get those 13 guys from 1960 to 2005, a chapter about each one of those guys and their recordings, list of what they were on. You could drill down on each guy, and then we'd spend a week on that each week.
Yeah.
And so the idea would be you could think about it, you could touch it, you could hear it, and now you could see it with the videos.
Yeah. You know, back in the 70s, early 70s, and then moving forward, before we got to internet having everything, I think, wasn't there like a monthly or weekly publication that came out like in the stores that would tell artists and what they recorded, who they were recording with, and
some of them had CDs in them.
Wow, yeah, the newest releases, because I would just eat that thing up and find out.
It would be like one cut, it'd be like a composite of all the feature stories, and then you would get it kind of like what you get with the URL list in the magazine now.
Yes, exactly.
And I think it was like Jazz Times or Jazz Is or something like that.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. So here's another diversion real quick. Michael Fagian, who's the creator of Jazz Is. Do you know Michael?
No.
He went through medical school. I think this is back in the late 70s, early 80s. He's a neurologist.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's the creator of Jazz Is magazine. We were talking a couple different times. I want to talk with him again soon, just about some stuff. But really interesting that his passion turned into a magazine. He started up with money from one of his professors, I think, invested with him, and then I think he ended up buying, paying the guy back or buying him out or something. And that magazine's still out there. I get the digital version now because, pretty interesting. Yeah, and I could be wrong. He may not be a neurologist, but he works a lot. He's a doctor, and he works a lot with people with movement disorders.
Wow.
And
talk about connections.
Isn't it? Yeah. Actually, that's why I wanted to talk with him, is to bring him on, not so much to talk about music. We've already done that, although it would be fun again, but to talk about the brain and all this other stuff,
Yeah.
Very interesting stuff. So in the videos, some of the videos online, I'm curious to know, are you using, what kit are you using? It almost looks like an Eames kit, custom made.
Yeah, the set that's here is Dyla International, okay. And they're made by Mauro Salvatore in Rome, and they used to be called Queme, and he had a drum school in Rome also. And I know, this is kind of convoluted, but the name that you might recognize is Horacio Hernandez. Worked for Mauro at his drum school in Rome. He left Cuba, but he couldn't come to the United States directly. So he was there for 3 years practicing and teaching, like nonstop. Mm-hmm. And so he got way, way better. He was good when he left Cuba, but he spent 3 years just practicing in Rome at Mauro's school and teaching. And he played Mauro's drums, called Queme. And if you look up Ed Simon his first recording, 1990 or so, has Horacio on it. And it has one of those little booklets that you open up, and there's the cornet set with Horacio playing it on it.
Okay.
And this is one of those sets.
Oh.
But it's called a different name. But I think we talked about that on another talk where I went to the concert, played outside festival, and the drums were there. And then they said, well, Maurer built those for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
We talked about that last week. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and so I've been for years since, I don't know, 1980 with Yamaha. And then stuff kind of fell apart around 2005. I couldn't get support in Europe, and I was doing most of my stuff every summer, spending in Europe, in Poland, in Italy, Spain, Switzerland. It was a real nice thing for like 25 years. But I couldn't get support from Yamaha there. I would go like at Montreux at the Jazz Festival, and Dave Garibaldi and Sonny Emery would be there, and I would be there.
Oh, great.
And they would get drums, and I couldn't get drums. So I was like, no. So Maurer would send me a set like this, and I'd play that there, and then they would go back to room. And eventually I went to another company. Maurer didn't have the money to send me different stuff. So I went with Thai drums for 2 years with Ray Ayat. Ray Ayat used to make Ayat drums. They were custom-made drums in the United States.
Okay.
Wooden hoops, beautiful drums. And then he worked with Thai for a couple of years. And Sergio turned me on to him because he was from Canada, Vancouver, but he was at the Montreal Drum Fest when Sergio played there. And of course, I was there with Sergio, and met Ray, and he said, "Oh man, come on, how many sets do you need?" Okay, so I had stuff wherever I wanted to go. It was great, and it was really. Go ahead.
No,
it was a neat support kind of thing to have that.
That's good. That's good. A couple things. So, hey, Mom. Mom is watching.
Good afternoon. You're here at noon.
We're talking drums with Skip and music and life. So in the videos, a couple of videos I saw of you, it looked like whatever you were using had wooden hoops, which made me think of Eames. Not that they were always wooden hoops, or maybe they were.
Those are the Yamahas. Those are the sea blue with the 19-ply wooden hoops.
Whoa!
Yeah, those are great.
I remember when those came out too.
Yeah, those rims were like, I think Sergio checked on the price of them. They're like $1,000 for a set of those hoops for the drums.
Oh man!
But I just said, I wanted to change the sound. I was doing that acoustic characteristics for the drum set class, right? It was like 2 hours with 10, 12 guys. And we learned about how drums, sticks, heads, and cymbals were made and how they influenced your sound. And it included tuning and a bunch of other stuff.
Great.
And it came to be that. So I would give them that drum set with the regular hoops on them. And they had flanged metal hoops. And then they took all of those off. And sometimes that didn't work out because guys would misthread the things, and then he would have to take the drums apart and redo the casings. But they put the wooden hoops on, and they were so amazed at the difference in the sound between metal hoops and wooden hoops. It took those were a set of birch drums, those Yamahas.
Nice.
And they had a really sharp, blunt sound to them with the metal hoops. With the wooden hoops, they were like maple or something even softer. It totally changed it.
What I heard, and this is just through my iPhone speaker from YouTube, is this beautiful, rich, woody sound.
Yes.
You could hear the wood of the drum.
Exactly.
And then, of course, the way you play just brings it all out. You know how to get the sound. And I was watching some of the broken eighth note stuff. You're using those. Yeah, it was very cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that was in my office at school.
Okay.
So people would say, what are you doing outside? Because it's all stone.
Yeah,
The background.
right.
That's
Actually, it
the,
looked like it was outside.
right. You know, it's the foundation for a 6-story building. So yeah, from back in the 100 years ago or so when it was built.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the Berkeley 1140 building basement foundation. So that's the back.
So I had another thing I was thinking, which seems to have left my mind at the moment, but I'm sure it'll come back. I'm finding it. So Mom, we were talking, Skip and I were talking earlier about how, do you remember back in the late 80s? I remember the band I was with the night I called you, the band's name was Sea Flight. We had some, I mean, the guy who put it together is an interesting character. I really love the music he wrote because it would make me emote, when I have like that feeling, not bad things, like mostly really good. It just made me feel things emotionally that I hadn't felt before, which is one of the things I love about what music can do, especially when certain people are playing it and all the different interpretations. But this is where, Mom, I said, get ready for something new, which I never really achieved yet, which is that flow. It's that space and flow state. In my mind, I hear, it's almost like instead of looking at the eighth note real close or the 16th or the measure or the phrase of 4 or the phrase of 16 or 32, it's backing out from a higher altitude view of what's going to happen, or the statement you want to put out there, which could last 20 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes, but the flow, beginning to end flow. Actually, talking with you, it's really helped me to kind of rethink this flow deal.
One of the things that happens about the flow is that we're doing it every time we get together and do this conversation thing. Is the flow is the same thing as it would be in music, and it works with us because we listen, we respond. Sometimes we talk over one another, but it doesn't interrupt the flow of the idea of what's going on. Or we forget, and then we go back around and pick it up. But that's the same thing that's going on with the music. It's really
it's mostly I forget. I'll blame it on ADHD and COVID.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to try to beat you at that
one. No.
But it's in my mind, it's the same. And there'll be people that you can talk with and you can understand what's going on. Other people you can't get a word in edgewise, and it ends up being not such a great experience. It might be great as far as like what you learn from them. And if you don't have anything to say, it's okay. But usually the thing works because there's a ebb and flow to the ideas and what's going on with people say and tangents off of that. And they end up being, for me, it's the same thing as, improvising. It's the same.
And so we're back to the parallels again, music and life, music and conversation, music and movement. That's something I'm studying more and more. I'm pretty sure I've already shown you this. And I'm only about a quarter of the way through this book, and not in order of how it goes, but this Handbook of Neurologic Music Therapy.
Mm-hmm.
This is not your average music therapy book. This is what's going on in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect the limbic system and how you feel and what emotions you feel? How does movement and music created intrinsically, like we're actually creating it, whether we're singing, dancing, playing an instrument, or if we're listening to music, because all of it changes brain activity. The best deal for the brain is to create and do it with somebody. Maybe it's just dancing together or singing together. That's enough. And from a therapeutic standpoint, not even, this is for all humans. It's like you don't need to have a diagnosis of a problem, or you're depressed or this or that. It's just can be therapeutic. Maybe you have anxiety, maybe you have stress, in this. You're talking about, is it your mom or grandma whistling while they're doing stuff? I bet that, besides the fact that, remember dad used to be humming tunes all the time. And he would just do that, or he'd walk over to the piano, play a few things, hum, maybe sing the words. I think that's a great stress reducer, but I don't really even sure I'm making an actual point here, other than this is an ongoing journey that will never have an end. And the process of discovering possibility in what movement can do to help us, movement and music together, music alone, creating it, listening to it, or doing it with somebody. So fascinating. Just like conversing, just like talking.
Yeah, it ends up being too like all about communication and education, and people learn things about whatever. But I can't do it so much anymore because of the COVID kind of thing, but I used to say that the education that I did with them was knowledge as a communicable disease. And that I was infecting them with all these ideas. I don't use it too often now because it just wasn't, it's just not that cool, but it's the same thing, is that you learn things and then it puts like you off on a tangent or something else. And then later on you go, oh yeah, I always wanted to check on, and then you're off on another, if you want, down another wormhole. But the idea is that it means something for you enough to respond to it and then investigate what's going on.
Yeah. Oh man, it's all just fascinating to me. I really find conversations like these, especially, talking with you, I've really enjoyed so much. So I have to continue this and keep exploring ideas and things like that. One of these days I'll get out there and we'll hang out a little. Maybe I'll bring a pair of sticks with me.
Yeah, I have some here. You don't have to worry about that.
You won't like hearing me
unless I practice.
Yeah. Okay.
Plenty of stuff for you to try.
Oh yeah, you got that flat ride, man. I love that. I had a flat ride, and I actually don't know what happened to it. It was given to me by somebody back in the 80s, a drummer friend of mine, Vinny Ludovico, and I don't know what happened to that cymbal. I also don't know what happened to the Fender Rhodes I used to have. I honestly don't know. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. It's not like you dropped the shoe somewhere.
No. What happened? I don't know. Well, listen, Skip, I'd love to keep talking. Actually, pretty soon I should go, and I need to work with somebody at 12:30 and help them move.
Oh, yeah, cool.
But this is yet another a real pleasure and just a great talk. Appreciate your time and your friendship. Yeah.
Well, I always appreciate spending time with you too. It goes off in these memory lane things, but at some point we talked about it, putting a plan together to do concepts and stuff, but maybe something will come out of that.
Yeah, I'd love to explore that. That would be real good. So I'll be in touch then, and we'll email and things like that. We'll keep the dialogue going, and maybe next week we do the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
I'll be around.
Yeah, just let me know. I'll send you mind games as soon as I get done.
Oh, good. Please. Yeah.
All right. Skip, take care of yourself. I'm glad to hear that you're doing better. Maybe that some of those symptoms are relaxing a little bit on you.
Yeah, it's mainly just fatigue and loss of smell, which will come back probably. I'm getting through it. Just got to fight through it and then rest a little more often than usual. But yeah, it's definitely I'm on the mend. So, and thanks, Mom. I'll see you. I'll talk to you soon, Mom. I'll talk to you soon, Skip.
All right. Take care of yourself again.
You got it, my friend. You too.
So,
see you later, buddy.
Ci vediamo.
Okay. Bye-bye.